الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. قال الله تعالى في محكم تنزيله بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وهو الله لا إله إلا هو له الحمد في الأولى والآخرة وله الحكم وإليه ترجعون. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اقرأوا القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه. وقال الإمام الجزري رحمه الله تعالى في منظومته المقدمة فيما يجب على قارئ القرآن أن يعلمه: مخارج الحروف 17 على الذي يختاره من اختبر. صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ما قال ربنا وخالقنا ورازقنا من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you all, and thank you for joining us on this second lesson of Tajweed Made Easy, hosted by the Caribbean Muslim Network. Again, our thanks to those behind the scenes, Dr. Ridha and others, for putting this together, and always, inshallah, keep them in your du'as and your prayers. As we start today's session, a quick reminder from last week that we need to be starting with the name of Allah, with the praise of Allah, making sure our intention is renewed of why we are here and what we are hoping to gain from this session. And inshallah, if possible, try to be in a state of wudu, in a state of physical purification, just because of the type of knowledge that we're trying to connect with. Inshallah, that will help our connection with our physical purity, inshallah, leading to our connection with this holy book. As usual, these lessons are being recorded, so if you need to leave early, if you need to refer back to them in the future, then they are available for you to refer back to. I'd recommend, just like last week, if you have the workbook modules, which we sent to you so that you can follow through, that would be ideal. If not, just a pen and paper, just so that you can make some notes. Again, even if it's not everything that you write down, maybe just specific things which you find are new, and then you can always refer back to the material afterwards to fill in any gaps that you might have. Bismillah. So we'll make a start today. Last week we started with a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where we kind of differentiated between two different groups of people who will be starting their journey with the Quran. One group who are quite confident with their Quranic recitation and they're striving to become a lot better, and another group who are starting off and really struggling. We talked about how, despite whichever category you may be in, there's still that incentive, inshallah, to strive as hard as we can. So the hadith that we're going to look at this week is shown here on the screen. It's a hadith narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man qara'a harfan min kitabillahi falahu hasanatun, wal hasanatu bi'ashri amthaliha. La aqulu alif lam mim harfun, walakin alifun harfun, wa lamun harfun, wa mimun harfun." We'll just read that through one more time. من قرأ حرفا من كتاب الله فله حسنة والحسنة بعشر أمثالها لا أقول ألف لام ميم حرف ولكن ألف حرف ولام حرف وميم حرف. Okay, so it's said, narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the great Sahabi radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, who said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Whoever recites a letter from the book of Allah, then he receives a reward from it, and the reward of 10 the like of it. I do not say that alif lam mim is a letter, but alif is a letter, lam is a letter, and mim is a letter." So we've got this hadith here today, and it links into what we, inshallah, will be studying today. So I thought this was the most apparent and one which would link in the best for us. So I'd say this hadith probably splits into two parts: the first couple of lines in Arabic, and then the second couple of lines where we have the explanation. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us something which matches into one of the verses of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Man ja'a bil hasanati falahu ashru amthaliha." Whoever does a good deed, then they will get rewarded 10 times that amount. And we know that this is from the great blessing, the great ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that just for one action, there's 10 times the reward for that. So everything will always be in our favor if we're willing to give that connection, to make that striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so that even if we intend to do a good deed and we don't actually get around to doing it, we still get one single reward for that. So again, this shows and links back to the great blessings and favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon us with this religion. So the Prophet ﷺ is again reiterating this verse of the Quran, saying that whenever you read a letter of the Quran, you get 10 rewards for each of that letter, for each of those letters. And I think that's quite a simple thing to understand, because it links into, as we say, every other action that we do, intending to do good and then actually commit that good. But the hadith doesn't stop there. And again, it explains exactly what was said in the first half. So the Prophet ﷺ actually gives us an example of a sentence of the Quran and picks out every single letter from that and tells us that each of those letters, and says them by name as well. Alif is a letter, Lam is a letter, Mim is a letter. So what's the reasoning for that? I think the main reasoning that we can get from this is that when you hear that the Quran, that every letter of the Quran gives us 10 rewards, it's very easy for us to open the Quran and our eyes get drawn to letters, but more so the letters, they probably just get drawn to the words. So instead of seeing an individual letter, because the Quran is made up of sentences, you're more likely to see a word, and then it's just your subconscious which lets you know, okay, that word has 3 letters, that word has 5 letters, 2, 4, more or less. So I think what this hadith is trying to tell us is, not only are your eyes looking at those words, but in fact those words are indeed made up of letters, and it's not just the word, but every single letter that you recite, which will be giving you those 10 rewards. So again, it's just pushing us back and making us realize the great blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed on this book and bestowed on us for being able to recite this book. And indeed, it links back to the title of this course and the phrase that we went through last week, the verse, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ, that the Quran has been made easy, and it's been made easy by this very hadith, that every single letter is giving us a reward and drawing us towards it with the immense reward that it contains. So subhanallah, an incentive for us, just like last week, that not only are we getting a reward by reading this book and connecting with it and learning about it, but the amount of reward, subhanallah, is an innumerable amount of reward that we will be getting with this book. So just something to ponder on as we start today's lesson. As we mentioned last week, that today's lesson, we are going on to the origins of the letters. So last week we had a little bit of an introduction. We talked about what the Quran is, what tartil is, and then we said we start with the letters at that basic level. Referring back to the poem which we had last week, we said وَرَدُّ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ لِأَصْلِهِ, everything goes back to its origin. And as we're building on things more advanced in the weeks upcoming after this week, today's lesson kind of brings us back to what's very important at its origin. So really starts off at a simple level, which we will be building upon as the weeks go on. So Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, we'll make a start for today. So this is an example here of the Quranic alphabet and a part of the Quran taken, written at the time of the Prophet ﷺ or just after. So again, if we take a step back and look at things from a historical point of view, we mentioned last week that with the Quran, it came down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the angel Jibreel, came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was written between the covers of the Mus'haf, and it was a challenger to those around it, and it kind of came down through the generations through that concept of at-tawatur. So if we kind of just stop at that level where the Quran was being written down and compiled, we know that the Quran was written on different bits of kind of date palm and paper and things that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ could get their hands on. And those were all compiled together. And at the time when everything was compiled together into that Mus'haf, Islam had only really spread to the Arab Peninsula. So the area that we now know as Mecca, Medina, the Hijaz, even if you call Arabia as a whole, it had only really spread to that area. So when it was written down, it was written in a way in which the people who were going to be reading it would be aware of what was being written down. So there was no need for there to be kind of extra markings on the Quran to make things a little bit easier for those that weren't from that area. So as we know, Islam quite quickly spread to the surrounding areas of Arabia. And in spreading to those areas, Islam came across, or people who weren't Arabs came across Islam. And then the challenge was there for those people to start being taught and start reading the Quran. However, in the form that it became challenging. And I think just from ourselves looking at what we've got on the screen here, it does look quite different to what we've got today. And even at this point, despite all the things that we're going to be going through, you can see how distinct it stands to what we have today. You can probably just about make out the name of Allah and a few different letters, but it's very different to what we have today. So at the time when Islam was spreading to those non-Arab areas, there was an Imam at the time called Nasr ibn Asim, who passed away in the year 89 after Hijrah. And what Nasr ibn Asim, the Imam at the time, took it upon himself to do was to add what we call the nuqat, as in the dots onto the letters. What we know is the single, the double dots, whether they're below or above the letter. And that allowed those letters to be differentiated from one another, and so allowed teaching those letters to become a lot more simpler. A second thing which was done was all the letters which looked similar were bunched together within the alphabet. And we'll be seeing later that the sequence of the alphabet actually used to be quite different to what we have today. But as we said, Imam Nasr ibn Asim joined all the letters which had a similar shape together, again, for ease of teaching, for ease of those people who weren't as accustomed to the Arab language to start learning, teaching, and then embodying the Quran for themselves. Okay, so if we go on to the actual alphabet, which we are more commonly used to today, we have what we have here on the screen. We, in the workbooks, have chosen to use this kind of style with the dots for the actual letters, so that you can practice writing the letters if you've got those printouts or if you've got the workbook in front of you. And you can either do that now or at a later time, just to get your hand used to writing Arabic, different from what we're learning here with the more theoretical side. Okay, so I've got a question to ask you all now, and inshallah in the chat group we should be having a document being shared with you, just for those who aren't as aware of what these letters are. There will be a transliterated version being shared with you now. Okay, so for those who can see the screen, if I was to ask you what the first letter of the Arabic alphabet is, what would you say? And you can write your answer in the chat box, and let's see what kind of variations we have. So I think everybody's going for the same thing. So yeah, so we've got our first iteration with with a question mark, which does beg the question of what the first letter of the alphabet is. Okay, so the majority have said alif, and as a base rule, the first letter of the Arabic alphabet is the letter alif. The question arises, and what we want to discuss now is the fact that the letter alif, despite ourselves knowing that it is the first letter of the Arabic alphabet, it itself as a letter cannot actually take a vowel. So the vowels which we talked about last week and which we'll be revising this week again, your fatha, dhamma, kasra, your actual sounds which takes a letter from just a letter to an actual sound, alif can't actually take those vowels. Okay, I might actually just change to the whiteboard just to show things a little bit more. Okay, so as I said, alif as a letter actually can't take a vowel. So what we have now is a different letter, which, as somebody said in the chat box, is called hamza. So again, at the time when the Quran was being written down, there had to be this differentiation between the letter alif, which is a letter of the Arabic alphabet but can't take a vowel, and another letter which is called hamza, which has a very similar sound but it itself can take a vowel. And if we just write them down just so that people can know what exactly they look like. So this would be your alif, and this would be a letter Hamza. The letter Hamza historically was formed by the alim Khalil ibn Ahmed al-Farahidi, who was the teacher of Sibawayh, one of the famous linguists, the famous Arabic grammarians at the time. And because the origin of the letter Hamza comes very similar, very close to the letter Ain, the letter Hamza is actually the head of the letter Ain as its own letter. So the question is, why is the letter Alif called the first letter of the Arabic alphabet? And why is it not Hamza then, if it is Hamza itself which can take a vowel? The answer is because Hamza routinely can actually be written on the pedestal of an Alif. So whether it's got a fatha or a dhamma, or whether it's got a kasra, a lot of the time when you see a Hamza, especially at the beginning of a word, it actually will be written on the pedestal of an alif. And that's why these two words historically have been used interchangeably. Okay, so you have, just to repeat, you have an alif here, which is commonly known as the first letter of the alphabet, but it can't take a vowel. You have a Hamza, which is a separate letter, comes from a very similar place within the throat to the Ain letter. And because it's written on a pedestal, that's why you have that differentiation between it being called a Hamza and between it being called an Alif. So just a little bit of historical information for us all, just to get up to date. So that begs the question, how many letters do we actually have in the alphabet if there is this differentiation? And again, I'll let you all decide how many letters you feel may be in the Arabic alphabet. If you want to write in the chat box how many letters you are used to knowing. So we've got 29, 26, 30 or 29, 26, 29, including Hamza, and that's the correct answer. So as a base rule, there are 28 written letters of the Arabic alphabet. 28 because we are not including alif, because alif cannot take its own vowel, and as we'll see shortly, it can only be preceded by another vowel. Whereas if we are including alif, and some alphabets that you will see written down will include a hamza and will include an alif as well, but that alif then is only a spoken letter, and that's why sometimes you may see the number 29. So a slight differentiation there between 28 and 29, between written and spoken, and the key difference is whether you include an alif or not, or whether you call that first letter a hamza, or whether you call it an alif, despite how you may see it written down. Okay, so just a little bit of historical analysis of what the alphabet is. So we mentioned that the Quranic alphabet by Imam Nasr ibn Asim was compiled together, and all the letters which had very similar shapes were brought together for ease of learning and teaching. So what you can see here on this slide are the letters of the Arabic alphabet, and you can see what we were talking about, that the second line has 3 letters which look very similar, and the only thing which differentiates them are the number of points which you have. Same with the third line, very similar shapes. The only thing which is differentiating are the number of dots, and that is what was the science at the time for ease of teaching. And another historical aside for today is an introduction to why the alphabet in Arabic is called Al-Abjadiyya. So the Arabic alphabet is in Arabic called Al-Abjadiyya, and the reason for that goes back to the historical sequence of what the letters were in the Arabic alphabet before they were linked in the sequence that you can see here. So what we've got on screen is actually the old formulation of the Arabic alphabet. And you can see that the first letters in the Arabic alphabet at the time were Hamza, Ba, Jim, and Dal. And that's where the word Abjadiyya comes from. And it links back to other Semitic languages that also have those 4 letters as their starting point. And that's where that link was made between the two before things were formulated in the sequence that we know it now. So if we read it through in the old sequence, you've got Abjad Hawwiz Hutli Kaliman Sa'fas Qarashat ثخذ ضغض ضغض, excuse me. So that was the old formulation of the Arabic alphabet. Another interesting thing to note was that at the time, the abjadiyas in the old formulation of the Arabic alphabet, each letter was actually given a numerical value. So the hamza at the beginning was given a numerical value of 1, and the ba 2, the jim dal, and so on. So you had each letter within that alphabet of the old formulation being linked to a specific number. And then from 1 to 9, they were made their way through. And then from 10 to 90, and then from 100 to 1,000, that encompassed all those old letters. The reason why I'm linking into that is because it links into a number which we're all very regularly used to seeing, or maybe in the past used to seeing, and that's the number 786. 786. So we know the number 786 has been used historically, even though there's no kind of original foundation for it, to mean Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, for a sequence of the Basmala. And the reason why you get 786 is because it's an addition of all the letters of the Basmala in this sequencing that we've gone through here. So again, just a little bit of interesting facts before we actually get started for today. There was an old formulation of the Arabic alphabet. They were assigned numerical values, of which we are apparent and we have been made aware of even in this day and age. But the Arabic alphabet has been formulated differently in the sequence that you can see here on the right hand side. And it's the dots which are differentiating the letters from each other. There are either 28 or 29 letters, depending on whether you take Hamza or Alif as a letter or both. And that would determine the exact number of the Arabic alphabet. Khair. So just been asked to repeat the point about 786. Each letter of the old formulation of the Arabic alphabet was assigned a number. And if you add the numerical assignment of the letters of the Basmala, so if you take the number for Ba, the number for Sin, Mim, so on, it links it adds up to the number 786. And again, just a bit of an aside, just to have a little bit of a historical fact giving for today, more than anything. So that's the abjadiyya, the letters of the Arabic alphabet. We said there are 28 written letters of the Arabic alphabet. Today, what we're going to be going through, inshallah, are the origins of those 28 letters, as in where they come from within our anatomy and how to pronounce those letters. So inshallah, in the next few weeks, when we talk about the characteristics of those letters and how those letters come together, we have a knowledge of exactly where those letters come from. And again, linking back to the poem, everything goes back to its origin. Before you know how to put letters together, you need to know exactly where they come from so you can know how to join them together. So it's a very key lesson. A lot of it might sound quite simple, and there may be bits which you may be able to gloss over just because you have practiced those specific ideas. But if we take things as a whole, inshallah, nothing will be missed out. Okay. So before we start talking about our origins, just a little bit of terminology before we start. We've got on the screen here the word kharaja. Kharaja. So 3 letters. So just as we said with the word Quran last week, when we were explaining what the Quran is, we said it comes from 3 root letters of a verb. Qa, ra, and a, and hamza. We've got the same formulation here of the 3 letters, kha, ra, and jim, all with a fatha on, and they make the word kharaja. So kharaja as an infinitive means to exit. Literally, it means he, she, or he exited in the 3rd person. But as a baseline, we can class it as an infinitive and say it means to exit. So if we go to the next box, we have the word on our screen, makhraj. Makhraj. So we've taken the 3 letters kharaja, and what we've done is we've added a meme to the beginning. What that does is it makes it into an ism makan from a grammatical point of view. It makes it into a type of word which denotes a place. So just to link into other words which we might know of, the word masjid. We know the word sajda is a prostration, whereas when we add a meme onto the beginning, it actually takes it into a place of prostration. Similarly, we have the word ta'am, food. And then when we add the letter meme on the beginning, it becomes a place where you are in contact with food, as in are eating the food, and you get the word restaurant. So it's a simple way to make a standard verb into an actual place by addition of that meme at the beginning. So we've gone from to exit. Now by addition of the meme, we've gone to a point of exit. And by point of exit, we first come across the word origin. And we're talking about the origin of the letters here. And then to go on to the next box, we have the word here shown in the screen, very similar to the one in the middle, but it's taken it from the word makhraj to the word makharij, makharij. So we just have a slight elongation of that kha letter. And what that does is it simply takes the word makhraj, point of exit, to a plural, from a singular to a plural. And in relation to what we're talking about today, it takes a single origin to multiple origins. So if we're talking about origins of letters, what we're talking about today is makharij, al-huruf, which is a word we came across last week. Makharij, which is plural of the word makhraj, and makhraj coming from the word kharaja, meaning to exit. And with regards to makharij, specifically the points of exit of the letters. So when you come across these words now, you know a little bit about where terminology-wise they come from and how they all link together. Okay. So again, we're talking about these 28/29 letters of the Arabic alphabet, and we're talking about their origins. With regards to origins, from an academical point of view, there are two specific types of origin that we could have. One type is called a makhraj muqaddar, makhraj muqaddar, and that means a non-specific origin. On the other side, we've got a makhraj muhaqqaq, makhraj muhaqqaq, and that means a specific origin, a specific. So you've got a differentiation between something very specific and something very non-specific. And again, when we actually go through the origins, you'll see it's quite clear-cut why they are called specific and why one is called non-specific, just determined by the actual origin, which we're going to discuss. But from an academical point of view, there are two different types, determined by whether they actually relate to a specific part of our anatomy or whether they just refer to a general part of our anatomy, which we'll be seeing soon. So again, to reiterate, we've got kharaja, to exit, makhraj, our point of exit or our origin, makharij, plural, our origins, split into two different types, whether it's a specific point of origin or a non-specific point of origin. Okay. So on this next slide, if we just go through the English first. So we've talked about makharij. These are our origins of these 28 or 29 letters. With those 28 or 29 letters, they have been classified into 17 specific origins. So all of those letters, obviously some will have to come from the same point then, if it's a lower number, which it is. So there are actually 17 specific points of origin, which we are going to come across now. It's difficult from a teaching perspective and from a learning perspective to go through each 17. So for ease, those are categorized into 5 main points of origin. So again, 28 letters, 17 specific points of origin, but for ease, those are categorized into 5 main points of origin. Okay. And inshallah, the bulk of today will be going through what those 5 points are and what letters exactly relate to those 5 main points of origin. Okay, so the picture that we've got here, apologies for those who can't particularly read the Arabic, but I'll go through exactly what they mean. So this form that we've got here is kind of like a midsection, like a sagittal plane of a body. And most importantly, the head and the neck. So starting just from the top of the chest and going through just underneath the forehead towards the top of the nose. And we've got here demarcated the throat towards the bottom, the tongue, which you can see here, this large red muscle here, the space within the mouth, you can just see the teeth behind the tongue, coming towards the teeth towards the front, and then right at the front, you've got the lips. On the top of the mouth, you've got this hard area here called the hard palate. And if we go a different way, you go up to the nose, and then you have an opening towards the nose as well. I mean, we're quite obviously aware of our anatomy, but I think seeing it in this view, it just makes us a little bit more aware of the connection between all of these things. So you have your throat, but where your throat finishes, your tongue starts. And then you have your tongue and you go towards the end of the tongue, and then you have your teeth and your lips. So it's good to view them all in unison, despite having specific parts along them, which we'll be seeing today. So I thought it important just to show you that from that plane, and inshallah the pictures that we'll be seeing in the upcoming slides will also have this plane so that we can relate back to it as well. Okay. So we're going to start now with the 5 main points of origin, which we talked about, which contain these 17 specific points. The first one which we're going to see is called Al-Jawf. Al-Jawf. So Al-Jawf is described as the empty space. The empty space. And it's the empty space specifically within your throat and your mouth. So the empty space within your throat and your mouth is called Al-Jawf. So if we ask the question, are we talking about a specific place that we can pinpoint, or are we talking about a non-specific place? Obviously, it's a non-specific thing because it starts all the way at the bottom, comes all the way to the top towards our lips, and we're talking about all the space contained within it. So Al-Jawf is an example of a makhraj muqaddar, a non-specific origin, which we talked about previously. And it's actually the only non-specific origin which we have out of the 5. Okay. So Al-Jawf, the empty space within the throat and the mouth. And it's an example of a non-specific origin. So we can't pinpoint an exact area, and it's just a general region. And we've said this is the only non-specific origin. So the upcoming 4, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all are specific points of origin, which inshallah we will be seeing soon. Okay. So that begs the question, if it's a non-specific point of origin, how can we get letters from that area? Because it needs to be reproducible. So actually, from Al-Jawf, we don't actually get any letters, but instead what we get are the 3 sounds of huruf al-mad. Huruf al-mad. So to explain exactly what they are, we're just going to take things completely back to a very simple level, just to explain where we're all up to. Okay. So we know that in the Arabic language, there are 3 vowels which we can put on a letter to be able to give us a sound. So we have the first, which is a fatha, the second, which is a kasra, and the third, which is a dhamma. So I'll just write them out quickly for those who are not aware. And for those who are more aware of subcontinent teaching, you may be aware of the phrases or the words zabar, zir, and bish. Completely fine to use those words, but just for uniformity, we won't be using those words, but just to know that they link into exactly what we have here. So we have 3 vowels, and we know that they make the sounds, if I just change to a different color, they make the sounds a, e, and u. A, e, and u. We mentioned last week when we were doing the practice that whenever you have a fatha, you leave your mouth as it is, as open as you can. Whenever you have a kasra, you bring your bottom lip down to allow the sound to come through as a complete sound. And whenever you have a dhamma, whenever you have an u sound, you bring your lips to the forward again to allow that sound to come out. So we've said that these three diacritical markings are called vowels. And we put a vowel on a letter to allow ourselves to pronounce that letter. And when we pronounce a letter, we elongate it, as in we say it, to a single length, because there's only a single vowel on the letter, so we elongate it to a single length. What we're going to be seeing here in these three sounds which come from Al-Jawf, we're going to be seeing an increase from this single vowel length. And it comes from a very specific formulation with each of these vowels. So a fatha needs to be in a specific formulation, a kasra needs to be in a specific, and a dhamma needs to be in a specific formulation to be able to make these sounds. Okay, so we'll just write out now exactly what these formulations are. So we have a fatha, and we're going to write an alif after it, and we've got a kasra, and we're going to write a ya after it, and we've got a dhamma, and we're going to write a waw after it. Okay. So the green line is just showing that there's a letter before it. Okay. So here we have three different formulations. We have a fatha on a specific letter, it could be any letter, and after it, directly after it, we have an alif. In another formulation, we have a kasra, again on any letter, and after it, we have a ya. And lastly, we have a dhamma, again, it could be on any letter, and after that, we have a waw. We're not going to, but for ease of writing, we will show that there is a sukoon on those letters, and a sukoon joins it to what is before it. And again, you can't really in a mushaf see an example of this, but it just shows that there's a connection between these two things, and there's no vowel on that second letter, and they actually join together. Okay, so we said that when we have a single vowel, it's lengthened to a single length. And what we're doing here is we're adding a fatha to another letter, and it has to be an alif. And what that does is it takes a single length up to two lengths. So you go from 1 to 2 lengths. So instead of just saying like we said before with a single fatha, if we want to take that to 2 lengths now because of the presence of an alif, we double the sound. So we go from to So you can see we've doubled the length, and the reason is because we have an alif after it. It's gone from 1 to 2. A similar thing with a kasra. We had a single length by itself, but when it comes in this formulation, we go from 1 length to 2. So we go from E to E, E, E. So we take it from 1 length to 2. And again, similarly with the dhamma and the waw, we have a single dhamma which is said as U to 1 length. And when we have this formulation of a dhamma and a waw together, it goes to U, U. And again, we're bringing our lips forward with the waw and the dhamma, and we're bringing our lips down with the and the kasra. So what we have here are the 3 lengthening sounds. And in Arabic, those lengthening sounds are called huruf al-mad. And you may be used to be hearing the word mad before, which means to lengthen. And these are the actual sounds which lengthen. So the 3 lengthening sounds, a fatha and an alif, a ya and a kasra before, and a dhamma and a waw, take the single vowel lengths to 2 lengths in this formulation. And we'll see in one of the upcoming lessons towards the end, the rules of lengthening, And these three lengthening sounds form the basis of all the extra lengthening which we may do in the future. But at a very basic level, these are the three lengthening sounds. Okay. So what we'll do just for a completion, we'll just go through a few examples just to make it a bit easier to understand. Okay, so if we take three variations of the same word, okay, so as I said, we need examples of these three huruf al-mad, these three lengthening sounds. So we're going to be seeing three examples of those here. So we have our alif, and we have a fatha before it, and we have our ya, and we have a kasra before it, and we have our waw, and we have a dhamma before it. So what we have here are three examples of a lengthening sound, three examples of a harf mad. And as we said, if that was a single, if we take the first one first on the right-hand side here, if that was just a single letter with a fatha on it, it would just go to one length. But the fact that we have an alif after it, directly after connected to it, it takes it from qa to qa, qa. So we go from qa to qala, qala. Similarly, with the second example, if it was just a qaf with a kasra on it, would just be to one length. So it would just be to qi. But the fact that we have a ya after it with a sukoon on, although you won't see it written in the mushaf, because we have that formulation of a lengthening sound, it goes from one length to two, and it goes to qi, qi, qila, qila. Okay, and then lastly, a third example, we have a waw with a dhamma preceding it. So it takes the qaf just from one length to two because of this formulation, and you have yaqulu, yaqulu, yaqulu. Okay. So again, quite simple to understand. From Al-Jawf here, which is the empty space within the throat and the mouth, we don't have any letters that come from this space, but what we have are three lengthening sounds. Three lengthening sounds. And the three lengthening sounds all have to come in combination. So it's a fatha with an alif, a kasra with a ya, and a dhamma with a waw. When you have that combination of vowels and letters together, the length goes from a single vowel length to two lengths. And as we said, most importantly, it comes from Al-Jawf, this non-specific point of origin, which is the space within the throat and the mouth. Okay. So again, I think it probably would come naturally when reciting these sounds or these letters for that to happen, but it just makes it a little bit more apparent to bring it to the forefront of your mind. And again, from an academic point of view, it's good to know exactly where these sounds come from. And in the future weeks, so as we said, when we do the rules of lengthening, this will be very important because we'll be coming back to these original lengthening sounds when we're building up on them to more than two lengths. Okay, so just as a summary, Al-Jawf is the first of the five main points of origin. It's an example of a non-specific point of origin because it's just a generic space in that area. What comes from Al-Jawf? It is the three mad or lengthening sounds. And because they are lengthened sounds, it's not just a vowel by itself. They are not just to one length, but they're elongated to two lengths. Okay. So alhamdulillah, we finished one of the five, Al-Jawf. Probably the most simplest one, and again, we'll be coming across it in the future with these mudud sounds when we do the actual lengthening chapter in a few weeks. Okay. So the way that the scholars have split up the points of origin after Al-Jawf, what it does is it starts from the furthest part of the body and works its way towards that which is most apparent, which for us is our lips. So what is furthest away from us is actually our throat. And as we see, we'll be working our way towards the lips over the next few slides. One thing which I did want to mention with Al-Jawf, and if we just maybe leave the slide as an aside and just listen to what I'm saying for a second. When we talk about sound coming out, and especially with the huruf al-mad, with the lengthening sounds which we saw previously, it's important for us to have a bit of knowledge exactly where our sound comes from. So obviously we know that we have a voice box and that's where sound comes from, and then our sound in the variation of different letters with our tongue and our lips moving around allows a sound to come out, and then that comes out either through our mouths or through our nose, because those are the two areas where we have a space for sound to come out after our voice box does some work. The origin of all sound, when we come to reciting the Quran, should all be through the mouth. Okay, so the origin of all sound when it comes out should be through the mouth. There will be specific points when we will have to divert our sound from our mouth through our nose and actually nasalize our voice. But that's only in a very specific few times, examples of which we'll see in the next few weeks. And aside from that, as a general point, all of our sound should come through our mouth. If your sound does come through your mouth, what you will get is a very clear Quranic recitation. If it's uncontrolled, if it's moving from your mouth to your nose, or if it's completely nasalized, what you'll get is a non-distinct Quranic recitation, which is not sticking to its origin, which is not sticking to the asl of how it should be recited. So the question is, if we want to now try and practice how we are going to divert our sound to make sure it's as crisp as possible and to make sure it's not coming through our nose when it's not supposed to and it's all coming through our mouth, we have what we call, a lot of you may have come across before, we have the pinch test. The pinch test, so you can see my fingers coming together as in pinching. And what you do is you make a sound and you have to pinch your nose and release it. Pinch your nose and release it. And if that sound changes in its pitch, as in how you hear it or how it comes out, then you'll know that some of the sound is actually coming through your nose. And what you'll need to try and practice is all of your sound coming through your mouth. So if we just listen to a sound coming completely through the mouth, you'll hear the sound, and you can practice this at home as well. Hopefully there won't be too many people listening. The sound, So that's a completely vocal sound only coming through your mouth. If we now do the exact opposite and direct the sound through your nose, you have the nasalized sound. And if you were to do the pinch test with that sound, you would hear that change in pitch because it's stopping the sound from coming out by you pinching your nose. So again, nasalized. You might not be able to completely hear it on the microphone, but when you're doing it by yourself, you will be able to hear the difference between the two. And again, it sounds quite, what's the word, I guess, quite crude in a way, having to test your voice in that way. But that is the way that we've been taught from our teachers, and that is a practical way to be able to train your voice in the way that it should. So again, as an aside, before we come on to the second of these main points of origin, your sound should be coming through from your vocal cords through your mouth and should be completely clear, and it should be projected. There will be times when your sound needs to come through your nose and needs to be diverted, but that is not the origin of where your sound should be coming from. And if you do the pinch test and if you find that your sound is coming through your nose, then it's just about practicing and making sure all your sound is coming through your mouth, so that when you do need to nasalize, its effect can actually be seen. And obviously, if you were to recite nasalized, when we actually do need to do it, you won't be able to differentiate between the two. So then you're not really putting the rule into practice. So again, after today, if you've just got a few minutes, just take a moment, practice without the Quran in front of you, just practice your sound, practice your voice coming through your mouth, practice actively diverting your sound through your nose. And then as a last point, try to make a vocal sound through your mouth and divert it through your nose and back again, through your nose and back again. And what that will do is it'll allow your mind to become attuned to actively choosing where your sound goes rather than just leaving it to chance and not fully being in control of your Quranic recitation. So it's a very simple thing, but it will do wonders for your recitation just because the clarity that will come out will be a lot closer to the origin of what the Quran is supposed to sound like. Okay. So just a little aside there. So we've just been through Al-Jawf, which has the 3 lengthening sounds. It was a non-specific point of origin, so we didn't get any letters from there, but what we got were 3 lengthening sounds, which are lengthened to 2 lengths each when we have that specific formulation. We're now going to go on to our second main point of origin, which is Al-Halq. Al-Halq. And that's described as the throat. So as we saw in that picture before, it starts right at the bottom, just above your chest, goes all the way up through your neck, and then it stops just at the back of your mouth where your tongue starts. So if you were to look in the mirror or be able to feel where your tongue actually stops, that's where your throat starts. And with these letters, we'll be seeing exactly and pinpointing exactly where those letters come from. Okay. So as we said, the way that the letters have been formulated and been written down, they always have started from the furthest point origin, the furthest origin. So we'll actually start at the bottom of this table and work our way up in alignment with that. So we have the word at the bottom, furthest, and the word for that in Arabic is the word aqsa, aqsa. And we know the word Aqsa from Masjid al-Aqsa, as in Bayt al-Maqdis in Jerusalem, the furthest masjid, as opposed to Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, as described in the Quran and the Hadith. But here we have the word Aqsa, which means the furthest. And what is it the furthest bit of? It is the furthest bit of the throat. So if we take the lips as your point of origin, if we go all the way back, the bottom of your throat is the furthest point. So that becomes Aqsa, as in the furthest of your throat. Aqsa al-Halq. Aqsa al-Halq. The furthest bit of your throat. From the furthest part of your throat come 2 letters. And one letter we've seen in our introduction is the letter Hamza. The letter Hamza. Another letter, the second letter to come from that area, is the letter Ha. The letter Ha. Okay. So we have the letter Hamza, which is quite a simple letter. And if we were to put a Fatha Kasra Dhamma on it, we'd get the sounds A, I, U. A, I, U. And when I'm going through these, it's good for you to practice as well, just so that you can become attuned to the rules and the guidance that will be given. So we have the letter Hamza. And what I want you to do is take a finger and actually place it on your throat, which is Aqsa al-Halq, the furthest part of your throat. And I want you to feel where the vibration is, where that letter is resonating from. So if we go, I, I, U, U, you'll feel a very specific point within your throat. And the reason why we want to pinpoint that is so that we know where the second letter is going to be coming from. So we said the second letter is the letter Ha, and it's coming from the furthest part of the throat, and we've pinpointed exactly where that is. It's notoriously a more challenging letter to pronounce because of the fact that it comes from so deep within our throat, very close to our chest. Okay. The way to practice this letter is, as we've done, just focus on where the letter Hamza comes from and then change it into a letter Ha, and the vibration or where you're feeling it should be exactly at the same point. So if we go and then we go Ha, you can feel the vibration at the exact same point. If you don't feel it at that point, if you feel it higher up, it's not going to be that letter Ha. So that's the way to practice these 2 letters which come from Aqsa al-Halq, the furthest part of the throat. Okay. So moving up from the furthest part, we have the middle chunk of the throat, which is called wasat, wasat, and we're talking about the throat, which is Al-Halq. So we have wasat Al-Halq, wasat Al-Halq, the middle of the throat. And again, two letters come from this area, and these are the two letters of Ain, Ain, and Ha, Ha. So the letter Ain is probably the most distinct of the Arabic language, the one which non-Arab speakers or a non-attuned ear would probably pick out the most, just because it sounds so different from any other letter in the majority of other languages. So we know it's the letter Ain, Ain, and this of the two might be the one which you find more challenging. In the first, when we were going through the furthest part of the throat, we said it's the Ha which is more challenging. But in this, you could say it's the Ain. So what we'll do, we'll go on to the second letter. We'll know exactly where it comes from, and then we'll know how to trace back onto the Ain. So the second letter which comes from Aqsa al-Halq is the letter from Wasat al-Halq. Sorry, the second letter which comes from Wasat al-Halq, the middle of the throat, is the letter Ha, Ha, Ha. So this is quite an easy letter to pronounce. It's got a lot of breath expulsion with this letter. And as a person who wears glasses, I always say it's the sound that you'd want to make if you're wanting to mist up your glasses, to be able to wipe them, to be able to produce a little bit of steam. That's the exact sound that you'd want to make here. Ha, ha, ha. Okay. So again, take your finger, feel where that ha is coming from, and pinpoint where you want your ain to come from as well. So you go ha, 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 and then now we want to say the letter ain. You go a, so you make your way from hamza, from an you follow your way up until you get to the right point of origin, and then you can pronounce the letter ain, a. So again, when practicing these letters, always go to one which is easy. So for the bottom, I would say it's the hamza, and then try and pronounce the ha. For the middle of the throat, I would say the easy one is the ha, and then try and pronounce the ain. So it's just an easy way to try and get into practice of pronouncing these letters. So we've got hamza and ha, and ha. We've got ain and ha, and ha, and ha. Okay, so we've moved from the bottom, the furthest part of the throat, and we move to the middle of the throat. So again, moving up to the top of the throat now, instead of it being called the top, it's called adna al-halq, adna al-halq. So the closest part towards the lips, towards what is apparent to us, is the top of the throat. And we know the word adna, or the origin of the word adna, with the word dunya, because the dunya is something which is close, something which is palpable, something which we have to our touch, despite the illusion that it gives us. And that's where we have the word adna as well, the closest part of the throat. Okay. So from adna al-halq, the top of the throat, the closest part of the throat, again, we have two letters. We have the letters ghain and kha. Ghain and kha. So from these two, I'd probably say the letter ghain is the easier letter to say, because it is essentially a rolled G in English. So we have the letter G in English. If you make that fuller and you roll it, you get the letter Ra, Ra, Ra. And again, you can feel that vibration at the top of your throat, just behind your tongue, and that denotes exactly where the ghain is coming from. So again, if we're going to go to the more challenging letter now, which is Kha, we need to pinpoint that area. We know what it should sound like, and we need to try and make sure that the origin of those two letters match together. So we go Gha, 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 and Kha, Kha, Kha. Okay. So we've gone through 6 letters there now. We've said that some are easier, some are harder, but if we want to try and practice them, we go to the letter which is easier, and then pinpoint the area, and then try and say the letter which is a little bit harder. Okay. So just to take an aside and mention 2 things. You may have come across the concept of a big and a small ha. a chota ha and a bara ha in the subcontinents. They're called like a big or a stronger ha and a weaker or less strong ha, if you were to call it that. And the one which is easier to say, funnily enough, becomes the big ha, and the one which is more challenging to say, as in the one that comes from the aqsa al-halq, the bottom of your throat, becomes the smaller one. In fact, there's no differentiation between one being small and one being big. The only thing we can see which is differentiated here is its point of origin, and we'll see in the future weeks the characteristics that both of these letters have are actually the same. So the strength that we should be giving them is the same. Neither one of them is big or small. The only thing which is differentiated is the fact that ha comes from the middle of the throat and ha comes from the bottom of the throat. But as you can hear there as well, hopefully, the strength of those two letters are exactly the same and as strong as they can be, and there's no kind of big or small between the two. Second thing to note with regards to the letters of the throat is the mixing between the letter kha and the letter ha. The letter kha, as we said, comes from the top of the throat, the closest part of the throat, and ha comes from the middle of the throat. Ha, I would say, is not a very difficult letter to say, the one from the middle of the throat, but if you're not pinpointing exactly where that letter is coming from, then what happens is your mind pushes it higher than what it should be. So you have something which is between a kha and a ha. It's difficult to pronounce it exactly because it's not an actual letter, but you do hear that from time to time, especially when saying the word Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman, which we'll be going through in the practice at the end, inshallah. So in the word Ar-Rahman, we have the letter ha, which we've said comes from the middle of the throat, and it's that kind of misty ha, which is a strong ha. If you're not getting it from the middle of your throat and you push it slightly higher, you have a mixing of the letter kha. So instead of saying Ar-Rahman, you say Ar-Rahman, and you get this kind of KH, this kha sound, which creeps in. Obviously not at all correct. We're changing a letter there. We're adding in different characteristics. And what we need to do is take it back to its origin, know what the letter is, and know where it comes from. It's the letter ha, so it comes from the middle of the throat. It's a H sound. We know what characteristics it'll have in the next few weeks. So it's the letter ha, and we say Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman, with that ha letter coming through. Okay. So as an aside, after seeing these letters, there's no big or small ha. One is a ha, one is a ha, both as strong as each other, and there should be no mixing between a kha and a ha. A kha comes from the top, the closest part of the throat, and ha comes from the middle of the throat. Okay. So as we said, 28 or 29 letters, 5 main points of origin. Of those 28, we've now seen 6 letters of those 28. These letters are called, because they come from the throat, they're called huruf, letters, Al-Halq, the throat, letters of the throat. So it's important to join all of these 6 together because, again, we'll be referring to them in a future lesson. So these letters of the throat, it's good to bunch them all together because we'll be using them and referring to them in a future lesson. So Aqsa al-Halq, Wasat al-Halq, Adna al-Halq, the furthest, middle, and closest, and 2 each letters referring to all of those areas. So we'll now move on. So we've gone from the bottom of the throat, we've worked our way up. What's the next thing that we meet is the tongue. So it's quite a busy slide here, but we're going to be going through each of the letters individually. The tongue starts where your throat finishes. So we have ra and kha at the top of the throat, and directly in front of that, you have the tongue starting, and that moves all the way towards the tip that you can see and feel right at the front of your tongue. Okay. Similar to al-halq, similar to the throat, the tongue is categorized into a few different parts. We have the ones which we saw before, which were aqsa, meaning the furthest part right at the back, wasat, which means the middle, which is the middle of the tongue. But before we had adna, which means the closest. Here, adna, as in the closest part, actually changes to taraf, and it's called the tip of the tongue. So it's not called the closest part of the tongue, but to make it easier, and we're used to calling it the tip of the tongue anyway, it's called taraf, the tip. And as an extra one, we have the sides of the tongue as well, which are called the hafa, hafa. So we have aqsa at the back, wasat in the middle, taraf, the tip of the tongue, and then hafa, the two sides of the tongue, which we'll be seeing. With the points of origin, obviously we've had the throat. The throat itself can't move anywhere, so the letters which you're going to get from that point of origin are going to be quite rigid. Whereas what can move is your tongue, because it's a muscle, it can move around and it can change into different shapes. And that's why of the 28 letters, 18 of them actually come from the tongue, because that is something where you can have some movement, and that's why you can produce all these different letters with the tongue. So we're going to be going through now aqsa, wasat, hafa, taraf in order and just seeing all of these letters. But Al-Lisan has 18 letters which it refers to. Okay. So we start with aqsa al-lisan. So we had aqsa again, meaning the furthest part, and al-lisan, meaning the tongue. So we've got the back or the last portion of the tongue. And as we said, it's where your throat finishes and your tongue starts. It's probably difficult for you to maybe see it in the mirror or touch it because it's that far back. But from the letters that you will produce from that area, you'll be able to know exactly what that point is. Okay. From aqsa al-lisan, we have two letters that come from there, and those are the letters qaf and kaf. Qaf and kaf. So the letter qaf, you can see here on the right-hand side, and even from the way that you say it and you hear it, is a full letter. And again, we'll be coming through exactly what that means in the future lessons. And kaf is an empty letter. Kaf is an empty letter. So qaf and kaf, as you can see in the transliteration here, they've both got a very similar letter, a Q and a K, but the qaf is a full and the kaf is an empty letter. Despite the fact that they come from the back of the tongue, the furthest part of the tongue, there is a very slight difference between their origin. The qaf, as you can see here, you have the back of the tongue touching onto this pink bit here, which is actually the non-bony part of the roof of your mouth. So if you take your tongue, or even if you take your finger, and you roll it back from your teeth at the top, roll it back on the roof of your mouth, you'll feel a step in. You'll feel it falling in. And it'll go from hard, 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 and then it'll get soft. And that's the junction between the hard and the soft, what we call palate. The hard and the soft palate. So qaf itself comes from after that demarcation between the hard and the soft palate, as in where it does get a little bit softer. And it's the complete joining of the back of the tongue towards that soft bit of flesh there. Okay, so it's the complete connection of the furthest part of the tongue towards that soft bit of flesh. And as I say, you can feel it by just running your finger or your tongue back and feeling where it's not bony anymore. That's where the qaf should be touching. So you have the letter qaf, qaf, qaf. Okay, and that's a full letter. Coming slightly forward, so we're not on the soft part of the roof of the mouth anymore. We're actually at the junction, slightly forward, where the soft and the hard bit meet. Again, just where you can feel that little step with your finger or your tongue. That is where the letter kaf comes from. So it's still the back of your tongue, but it's just moved slightly forward, and that helps it not be full because the letter kaf isn't full. It's an empty letter and helps that sound come out. So here we've got the letter kaf, kaf, kaf. Okay, so we have the letter qaf towards the back on that soft area, slightly forward, same area of the back of the tongue. We have the letter kaf, kaf. Okay, so we have aqsa al-lisan, the furthest part of the tongue. Two letters come from here. They both concern the back of the tongue, but with the letter kaf, it brought slightly forward towards the roof of the mouth, where it becomes more bony compared to the qaf, where it's completely soft. Okay. So from aqsa al-lisan, we're moving forward again, and we're going to go to wasat al-lisan. So wasat al-lisan means the middle of the tongue, the middle of the tongue. And from here, we have 3 letters which come from this point of origin. So wasat al-lisan, 3 letters which come from this point of origin. So a question is just coming, does kaf come, if you just go back a slide, does kaf touch both the soft and the hard palate, or just the hard palate? It is the junction between the two. As you can see in the picture here, there's joining between the soft and the hard palate, so it joins the two. The main thing to know is that it's just forward from the makhraj of qaf. So it's just forward from the point of origin of qaf. That's when you'll know that you're at the right point of kaf. To be honest, you're not going to be that specific between knowing exactly where the hard and soft palate one finishes and one starts, but just by knowing that it's slightly in front of the qaf, that in fact will just do the job for you instead. Okay. So again, back to wasatul lisan, the middle of the tongue. We've got 3 letters which come from here. 3 letters which come from wasatul lisan, the middle of the tongue. And these are the 3 letters that you can see here: Jim, Sheen, and Ya. Jim, Sheen, and Ya. So if we start on the left-hand side first, we've got the letter Jim. What we're seeing here is the middle of the tongue, completely connecting with the roof of the mouth. And again, we're not concerned with the junction of the hard and the soft palate now. We're completely on the roof of the mouth where it's completely hard. And there's direct, complete connection off the middle of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. And that allows that Jim letter to come out. And we get the letter J, J, J. So that's the letter Jim. If we relax the pressure which we're putting on that middle of the tongue, on the roof of the mouth, and we change the actual letter to the second one, which is Sheen, that's what allows that letter to come out. So we've not got complete connection anymore. There's a release in tension, still at the same point, changing the sound. We have the letter Sh, 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 Sh. Okay. So one we have complete connection, one we don't, both from wasatul lisan. A side point is if you don't get complete connection with your jim, then what you end up is a letter between jim and sheen. And it is a common letter in certain parts of the world, the Arab world, for that letter to be pronounced, where you have the letter j, j, j. And there's not a complete connection between the tongue and the roof of the mouth, but for Quranic recitation, that shouldn't be there. You should have a complete connection between that middle of the tongue and the roof of your mouth, and that allows you to differentiate between j and sh, j and sh. Okay, so those are 2 of the 3 letters. The last letter is the letter ya. With the letter ya, you can see it's still coming from the middle of the tongue, but what actually happens to the back of the tongue, it actually drops down to allow this letter to come out. So you have the letter ya, ya, ya. So again, middle of the tongue, there's no pressure on the roof of the mouth, but the back of the tongue drops down, and again, that will happen quite naturally. It's very similar to the letter Y in English, and if you say ya or yeah, you would do exactly the same thing. So it's the middle of the tongue, no connection, bottom of the tongue dropping down. So we've got 3 more letters now from wasatul lisan, the middle of the tongue, jim, complete connection of the middle of the tongue to the roof of the mouth, sheen, a reduction in that pressure, still from the same point, and then ya, the back of the tongue coming down, and again, no connection of the middle of the tongue towards that roof of the mouth. You have the letters j, j, sh, sh, and ya. ya, ya. Okay. Somebody's asked for letters exiting from the middle of the tongue. It doesn't feel like it exits from the middle of the tongue. It feels like it comes from the edges. Is that right? And unfortunately, I would say it's not right. J, if you say J in English, J, 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 there is kind of a rolling of the sides of the tongue, but that's not actually where your force is on the roof of your mouth. So it's not that every other part of your tongue is completely settled, and it's just that one middle part of your tongue which rises up and touches the roof of your mouth. You will have some movement from the rest of the tongue because it's a muscle in unison with everything else. But the main point of connection will be the middle of the tongue. And I say, if you start in English and say j, and say jeem, and say j, that's where you'll get the exact point of origin of that letter. So jeem, sheen, and ya all come from the middle of the tongue, the three letters which we have gone through here. So we'll move from the middle of the tongue and we'll go to the next part, which is Hafat al-Lisan. Hafat al-Lisan, which are the sides of the tongue. So obviously with the tongue, we've started at the back, we've moved towards the middle, but we've missed out the two sides of the tongue. The two sides of the tongue are related to two letters, and those are the letters Bad and Lam. Bad and Lam. If you do the letter Lam first, it's very similar to the letter L in English. You have the sides of the tongue and a connection just before the tip of the tongue, also connecting just behind the teeth at the top. So still on the roof of the mouth, slightly more forward from where the middle of the tongue was hitting the mouth, hitting the roof of your mouth. You got the sides of the tongue and a portion just behind the tip, which have got complete connection, and that'll allow you to say the letter lam, 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 and la, la. Okay, so quite a simple letter to pronounce because we have a very similar one in English anyway. The next letter, which comes from the side of the tongue or the sides of the tongue, is the letter Dad. Dad. So the letter Dad, and again, we'll be seeing it next week when we do the characteristics of a letter, is probably one of the most challenging letters to pronounce, and one which has a very specific characteristic to help its sound come out, which we inshallah will be seeing next week. But from a theoretical point of view, the letter Dad comes forth from either one of the sides of the tongue having more pressure on the roof of your mouth, but touching where the teeth meet the roof of your mouth. Okay, so you can see on the picture here, you've got the teeth around, and if you feel in your mouth, there'll be a connection between the roof of your mouth and where the teeth start as well. And you'll have the same on the left and the right hand side. And with the letter Dad, what needs to happen is the side of your tongue on either side needs to go towards the hard part where the teeth meet it, connect towards it, have complete pressure, hold it there as you say the start of the letter, build up a little bit of pressure, and then that pressure releases as you pronounce the letter Dad. Dad. So again, a side of the tongue touching onto where the teeth meet the roof of the mouth, building up pressure, and then releasing, and that allows you to say the letter Dad. So I said one of the more challenging letters of the Arabic alphabet. I'd recommend that you listen to somebody's recitation, maybe even practice the last verse of Surah Al-Fatiha, which has a Dad in towards the end, and just focus on that one word, walad-dallin. So you say walad, 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 walad-da, walad-da, walad-da. Okay, so you can feel that kind of build up of pressure as the side of your tongue touches towards that roof, that side of the roof of your mouth, and then the release of pressure as you actually recite the letter. So again, with practice, Just focus on that letter. It is more challenging, but we'll be covering that letter next week, inshallah, as well. So with regards to lam, it's not actually classed as the tip. It's classed as what's called the muntaha, which is the portion just behind the tip. So yes, from a maybe general knowledge point of view, because it feels like it is the tip of your tongue, but it's actually just behind the tip. And the tip is what we will be seeing with the letters coming forward. So yes, lam does come from the side, and then it has a portion which joins in the middle as well. Okay. So another two letters, sides of the tongue, Hafatul Lisan, the letter bod, bod, ba, ba, and the letter lam, lam, and the sound la and la. Perfect. So definitely going through our letters now. And we've come towards the tip of the tongue, So we started towards the end, the furthest part of the tongue, towards the middle, sides of the tongue, and now we're right at the tip, coming towards the end. So as we said, the word for tip is the word taraf, and al-lisan, as we've seen it already, is the tongue. So we have taraful lisan, And the first letter which we're going to see here, coming from Taraful Lisan, is the letter Noon. Noon. So again, very simple, similar to the letter Lam as we just had. It's very similar to the letter N in English. You've got the tip of the tongue touching where the teeth and the hard part of the roof of your mouth meet, and you have the letter N. N. So it's the junction where you have your teeth and your gums starting, the roof of your mouth, and that's where the noon is hitting, right on that junction. Na, 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 noon. Okay, so quite a simple letter, again, because we've got a very similar one in English. So that's the first letter from Taraful Lisan. The next letter which we have from Taraful Lisan, again, concerns that very similar area of the tip, just as we had with Noon, but this time with the letter Ra, Ra. And with the letter Ra, it's a very specific letter, and we've mentioned it in passing with a few of the other letters with regards to fullness and emptiness. And Ra is a specific letter which very commonly can be full or empty depending on what kind of formulation the Ra is placed in. Depending on whether the Ra is full or empty, that will determine the shape of the tongue for the letter. What it won't determine is the positioning of the tongue. So your point of origin stays the same, but what actually changes is the shape of your tongue and how that fills your mouth to be able to make a full or an empty letter. So if we start with a full Ra, you've got, again, the tip of your tongue touching in a point very similar to the point of the letter Noon. And if we put a Fatha on it, you have the sound Ra, 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 Ra. And because of that fullness, what you can see here on the right-hand side, the back of the tongue actually lifts up to be able to fill the mouth and to be able for that sound to come out. On the contrary, if it is an empty sound, and if we put a kasra on the letter Ra, and we say Ri, 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 again, we're still touching that same point, but with your tongue, the back of the tongue doesn't come up, but it actually goes down to allow a softer, emptier sound to come out if the Ra is actually empty. So the two sounds we have, both from the same point of origin of Taraf al-Lisan, the tip of the tongue, are Ra, 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 and Ri, Ri, Ri. Okay. So again, we'll be focusing on this in one of the upcoming lessons, a very specific letter because it has a lot of conditions attached to it, depending on what type of vowel it has and the formulation of the word itself. So that's the second letter from Taraf al-Lisan. We had Noon, and now we have Ra. And Ra could be full or empty, but the origin doesn't change. What changes is the shape of the tongue to allow that fullness or emptiness to come out. Okay, So we are now moving. Just go back to Ra. Does the Ra actually touch the junction, or does it just vibrate in front of it? If what we'll be seeing in one of the next lessons, if it just goes back to Ra, the Ra, it does vibrate in front of it, but what we need to be careful is that we're not repeating the letter. So yes, it is Taraf al-Lisan. There isn't a complete connection. There is just a vibration of that point of the tongue towards that area. But what we need to be sure is that we're not repeating the letter and rolling that Ra sound. So we're not saying Ra, Ra, and Ri, Ri. So there is a vibration, but it's a controlled vibration as that Taraf al-Lisan goes to that point of origin. Okay, so there shouldn't be any what's called takrir, any repetition of the sound, despite the fact that it is vibrating as that letter is being pronounced. Okay, so the next set of letters which we have from Taraf al-Lisan are these three letters here. The letters on the right, we have Ta, Ta, and on the left, we have the letters Dal and Ta. So Ta, Dal, and Ta. These three letters, despite the fact that they have different shapes and one has letters and the dots, and the others don't, all these three letters come from the exact same point of origin on Taraf al-Lisan, on the tip of the tongue. And as you can see here in the pictures, it's the connection of the tip of the tongue onto the junction, as we've said previously, where the gum meets those top teeth and the teeth start. Okay, so it's the tongue, tip of the tongue, touching onto the teeth, but where the teeth meet the gum. Okay, so right at the top of those top teeth on the inside. We've split them up into two, or they have been split up into two, because the Ta on the right hand side is classed as a full letter, and you can see that by the fact that the majority of the mouth is filled with the tongue, and the back of the tongue really has come up to fill that space and allow that sound to come through. Whereas on the left hand side, those are examples of empty letters, so the back of the tongue has stayed down, again, to allow those sounds to come through. So I really want you to focus now as we go through the three letters in unison, and I want you to make sure that your tongue is coming from exactly the same place as we go through these letters. So we'll start with a Ta, and then we'll go on to the next two. We'll just add a fatha onto all of them, and just make sure that they are coming from the exact same point. So we have Ta, 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 Da, Da, Da. Okay, so we have Ta, Da, and Da. Ta is a full letter, Ta and Da are empty, all come from exactly the same place, and it's just the shape of the tongue which changes with the Ta, just to allow that sound to become a little bit more full. Okay. So another three letters which we've seen from Taraf al-Lisan, Ta, Dal, and Ta. We'll go on to the next three, and very similar. What is the difference between Ta and Dal? Just the name of the letter and the sound of the letter. One is a TAA, one is a DAA, one is Ta, one is Da, Dal, with a L at the end. Both are empty, but it's just that the sound of the letter is different. The point of origin is the same. So as we said here, on the next slide, we've got three more letters. Again, it's the tip of the tongue. With the previous three, with Ta, Dal, and Ta, the tip of the tongue was behind the teeth, behind those top teeth, and we were touching where the teeth meets the gum, where the teeth meet the gums. Whereas now we're taking the tongue down towards the end of the teeth and just slipping towards past the tip of the teeth. So we've gone down the back of the teeth, and we're just at the point where the biting surface of those teeth are. So again, if we start, it's just flipped around with the empty and the full letters, but we've got the full one on the left this time. We've got the letter Ra, Ra, and again, this is an example of a full letter, so you can see the back of the tongue is really lifted up to allow that sound to come through, and you can feel, and you can probably see the tip of the tongue touching onto the tip of those front teeth, to allow this sound to come through. And to help this, you can probably even just hold the letter a little bit more, prolong it, and really pinpoint exactly where it's coming from. So you can say the sound law, 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 or say al, al, and you can really feel the vibration there of that area of your tongue really touching on the biting surface. So again, we've pinpointed the area. We can move over to the other two letters now, which are tha and dhal, tha and dhal. These are empty letters, and you can see because they're empty, the back of the tongue has gone down to allow that sound to come through. We mentioned this with the word a'udhu last week, and we said that the is very similar to the sound the in the word the in English. And again, you've got your tongue on those tip of those front teeth. The two sounds tha, tha, and dhal, dhal, dhal. So again, three letters here, very similar to before. One's full, two are empty, all come from the same point of origin. They have got different names. The different letters have different names. So I don't know whether that last question is referring to that. Why not? Potentially that is linking into that point. The individual letters do have their names, and it's just for us to know what those names are, what the origins are, what the characteristics are, to allow us to say them. So we have la, tha, and dhal, all with the tip of the tongue touching those the tip of those top teeth to allow the sound to come through. So again, three more letters which we've seen from Taraf al-Lisan. Is anyone keeping count? What number are we on now? Does anybody know? We're reaching 20. I should hope people are around 20. So we're here towards the end now, inshallah. So we've got a few more from Taraf al-Lisan. So we'll move on to the next slide. So again, the tongue, we were at the back of the tongue, then the middle of the tongue, the sides, the tip, and then the tip moved down the teeth. It got towards the tip of the top teeth, and now the tongue is dipping towards the bottom teeth, and it's tucking in behind those bottom teeth. So we've had that kind of archway right from the back all the way, and now it's tipping in behind those bottom teeth. Similar to as we've seen before, there's three letters that come from this point of origin. One is full, you can see with the back of the tongue lifted up, and two are empty. And it's three letters which are bunched together, and they actually have very similar characteristics, and they have a characteristic of safir, which is a whistling or a hissing or a buzzing sound, because of the type of sound that all of these letters have in common. So the full letter on the left-hand side is the letter sad, sad, sad. And again, you can feel the tip of the tongue tipping and tucking in behind those bottom teeth with fullness because it is a full letter, as opposed to the opposite two on the next two on the right-hand side, where the tongue is still tipping back, but a different sound, an empty sound this time. You have the two letters zai, zai, and seen, seen, seen. So if we put a fatha on these three, we've got sa, sa, za, za, and sa, sa. So firstly, you can feel that the point of origin is tucked behind those those bottom teeth. Secondly, you can see the differentiation between the full sad and the empty zai and seen. And lastly, you can hear that buzzing sound, that whistling sound, which we talked about, which is a wanted and wanting to be enhanced characteristic of these letters. And by really getting your tongue to the point of origin, it'll allow this characteristic to come to the forefront for these three that we've talked about here. So sad, zai, and seen from Taraf al-Lisan. And that brings us to the end of the lisan. So again, to bring us back, we started with Al-Jawf, which were the three lengthening sounds. we had Al-Halq, we had 6 letters which came from the throat, starting at the bottom, working our way up. Then we started at the tongue, again starting right towards the back, came from the back to the middle, the sides, the tip, and that encompassed another 18 letters. So everyone can tell me how many letters we've got left, and it's these 4 letters which we've got on the screen, because that will bring us to 28 altogether, inshallah. So 28 letters are completed with these last 4, and all we've got left after the tip of the tongue to discuss are the 2 lips. So the lips, we know it a lip to be what we can see here, which is this red area, but your lip actually is the whole bit of flesh from the top and the bottom. So what you can lift out and kind of pull away, that whole area is your lip, rather than just the red bit, which you can see towards the front, just to have a little bit of knowledge of where the sounds will be coming from. So because there's not just one, but there's 2 lips, it's called Al-Shafataan. Al-Shafataan, the an on the end is to denote 2, in that there's more than one, and in this case 2 of them. And that means the 2 lips, or for simplicity, the lips. And there's 4 letters which come from here, the fa, waw, ba, and mim letters. Fa, waw, ba, and mim. So we'll just go individually again quickly, just to talk through these 4 letters and see exactly where they come from. So the first letter which we're going to see is the letter fa, the letter fa. So the letter fa only actually denotes or pertains to the bottom lip, the bottom of the 2 lips. So we're not talking about the top one at all, just the bottom one. And what happens is the tip of those top teeth, which we were talking about before, actually touches onto the junction between the moist and dry of the bottom lip. So I'll repeat again. The tip of the top teeth touch onto the bottom lip, but they touch onto the junction between the moist and dry bit of that bottom lip. And with the sound fa, that's where you get the letter fa, fa. And with a vowel, you get the sound fa, fa, fa. So again, it's not a complete connection, because it would be impossible for the sound to come out if there was a complete connection there, but it's just going to that point of origin, having the vibration, having the strength of the sound fa, and then really expelling the breath that comes with it, and that will allow that sound to come through. So you have the sound fa, fa, fa. Okay, and you can really see those top teeth and feel it, those top teeth coming onto that bottom lip. It's quite a simple one, even though it's a difference. It's kind of bringing two parts of the body together to make the letter. So the last 3 which we have are the letters mim, ba, and waw, if we go from left to right. So again, we've said that we're talking about the lips, and before we were only talking about one of the lips with fa, we were only talking about the bottom, whereas with these 3, we're talking about both lips in unison. And what can change between the lips to allow different letters to come through? It's how strongly those lips are coming together, or whether they are coming together indeed. So with the letter mim on the left-hand side, you can see that both lips are coming together, and it's the dry part of your lips. So it's not the inside to like kind of upturn your lips. It's just the simple dry part of your lips coming together with complete connection, and that will allow the sound ma, mim to come through. Very similarly, you've got the letter ba, which comes slightly behind the makhraj of mim. So it's not the dry portion completely. It's again on that junction between the 2. So it's slightly behind where the mim came from. But we have from here the letter ba, and ba. So you can feel the 2 lips coming together. It's slightly tucked in from the letter mim. You have that coming together, and then by releasing the lips, that allows the sound to come out. So we've had ma and ba, and the last letter is the letter waw. So we've had complete connection slightly less connection, slightly further behind. And now if the lips actually don't meet together, that's when we get the letter wow, wow. So the lips don't come together, but what you do actually do, as we've seen previously with a dhamma, is you actually encircle your lips and you say wa, wa, wa. So you need a physical movement of the lips now to be able to perfect this sound coming through. There's no touching of the lips, and it's the circling of the lips with the sound of the letter which will allow the sound to come through. So we've had ma, ba, and wa, wa. And obviously if a wow were to have a dhamma on, there would be double the reason for rounding the lips to allow that sound to come through. So those are the 28 letters which we've covered now, starting from the Al-Jawf, where the sounds came from. We've gone through the throat, we've gone through the tongue, and we've gone through the lips. And you can see we've actually been through all 28 letters because we had 24 coming into the lips, and now we've seen 4 extra ones with the fa on the previous slide. So what happens in the last point of makhraj? And somebody's just asked the question, is meme nasal? And that leads us on to our last point of the 5 main points of origin, which is Al-Khayshoom. So Al-Khayshoom is the number 5 of the main points of origin. It means the nose. There's no simple way or extra way of explaining what the nose is, just where the top of your throat doesn't go into your mouth, but goes up towards your nose and then leads all the way up to the nostrils to allow sound to come through. So we said before that when sound comes through, everything should come through from your vocal cord and should be completely vocal, unless we're choosing to make it nasal, unless we're choosing to divert it through our nose. So what would be the reason to divert it through your nose is if you've got some kind of stumbling block which stops the sound coming from your mouth. There are 2 letters which cause this to happen, which stop the sound coming through your mouth and actually divert it through your nose. Can anyone give an example of what they think those 2 letters may be on the chat box? Perfect. So mostly right answers and everybody's got the right idea. The 2 letters of meme and noon are written here, noon and meme. So noon, as we said, was taraf al-lisan. It had a complete connection of the roof of the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. And what that does is it diverts the sound when there is a complete connection through the nose. So noon, although it does come from taraf al-lisan, although it does come from the tip of the tongue, it has this second component towards it. Whereas if you hold on that letter, it actually diverts the sound through your nose. And that's where you have this origin of Al-Khayshoom, which is nasalization of the voice. Similar thing with meme, you have the 2 lips coming together. As they are coming together, the sound can't come through the mouth, so it's diverted back and it goes through the nose. The meme sound is nasalized, and that's where, again, it pertains to this origin of Al-Khayshoom, which is the nose. So we've said nasalization, which is relating to the letters nun and meme. Nasalization in Arabic is the word al-ghunna, al-ghunna. And again, in future lessons, this will become quite important because we'll be going through the exact points where ghunna is done and what the formulations of the letters should be to put al-ghunna into practice. Okay. So we've gone through the 5 main points of origin today. Let's see what we've got on the next slide. So this is just showing more so that we've got the complete connection of the taraf al-lisan for the noon and for the complete connection of the lips with the meme. The sound's being diverted, not going through the mouth, and it's going through the nose, and then we're getting that nasalized sound coming through from there, and that is an example of al-ghunna. So as we said, in today's lesson, we've covered the Arabic alphabet, the 28 letters. We've discussed kind of the differentiation between alif and hamza and why in the written Arabic there will be 28, but in the spoken there will be 29. But even if you see an Arabic alphabet, there may be a differentiation. You may see an alif, you may see a hamza, and we've talked about the difference and the reasoning for that. The types of origin, the one non-specific point of origin, which was Al-Jawf, the empty space, and the last four, which were specific points of origin, because we could pinpoint them to a specific area. And then we've gone through the 5 main points of origin of those 28 letters, and just given a bit of advice with regards to those letters. So just going through the questions now. If anyone does have a question, you can ask on the chat box just before we get to the practice for today. I've got a question. Can I check my understanding, as I'm a bit confused about the alif? Is the alif a non-letter because it can't take a vowel, therefore it doesn't have an exit point? So we use the exit point of a hamza for all alifs, as all alifs have a hamza. You can see them as two separate things. So alif can't take a vowel, so it needs a fatha before it, and you have a fatha and an alif together, and that comes from Al-Jawf. Simple. You have a hamza can take a vowel, hamza comes from the bottom of the throat, and that's where you have your hamza. So you have your alif and your fatha as a construction together coming from Al-Jawf, and you have hamza with any vowel by itself, and it comes from the bottom of the throat. So it's two distinct things. The only difficulty comes when we talk about the actual alphabet and what is written down and what it should be and what people know the alphabet to be, and that's where you have this differentiation between alif and hamza. But again, as long as you know the point of origin, what the sound should be, that kind of differentiation doesn't really make any difference. Nasalization wise, we'll be going into the rules of ghunna in a few weeks' time, so we'll leave that until then because it's quite a difficult topic, or one which we kind of need to stage step by step. So we'll not go into that now, but inshallah in 3 lessons time we should have that. If there are any more questions, we'll take them now. If not, we'll go on to the practice for today. As we said last week, we went through the ta'awudh, the saying of a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We just talked through a little bit about things which may go wrong and errors which may creep in and how we can rectify those things. The good thing is now that we've talked about makharij, now that we've talked about the origins of the letters, it's time for us to start putting those things into practice. So there's actual things that we'll be able to refer back to and pinpoint, and hopefully, inshallah, week after week, as we build upon the lessons, we'll be able to add more things in. So we might even be able to go back to at-ta'awudh and say, do you know what, we've mentioned a few things, but there's actually more that we can say about that, despite the fact that we kept things at a basic level in the first week. Okay, so go into our practice now. Again, if there are any lessons, questions, we can take them at the end. And as we said, last week we covered at-ta'awudh, which is shown here, and today we'll be going on to the phrase Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which is known as the Basmala. So what we did last week was we went through letter by letter. We just talked through what should be there, what sometimes can creep in, and then we just went through the ayah in continuity towards the end a few times before finishing. So inshallah, we'll continue in the same manner today. So firstly, we have the letter ba. The letter ba has a kasra on, and we said with a kasra, as we will also be wanting to do for the rest of the kasras in this sentence, is really bring our lower lip down to get what we call a kasra kamila. As we said, a complete kasra sound. If you don't, it's not that it's not correct, but it just doesn't stop. It just stops it from getting completely perfected. So again, every time you have a kasra, bring that lower lip down to help the sound come out. We have a seen after. There's complete connection between the ba and the seen. So there's no bouncing on the seen, and we don't say bisa, bisa, bisa. And there's no kind of extra vowel added onto that seen, but there's a complete connection between the two. And you say bis, 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 again with that lower lip coming down. Next letter, we've got the meme. Again, we know now we have got complete connection between the two lips. As we are pronouncing that meme, the sound will come through the nose for a split second, but then as the meme has its own vowel, then the point of origin will be back to the lips, the two lips coming together. We've got a kasra on that letter. That needs to be a complete kasra. So we bring the bottom lips down and say mi, bismi. Okay, that's linked to al-ism al-jalala, and we move from the meme straight to the lam with the shadda on, and we say bismil, bismil, and there's an elongation on the ism al-jalala, as we saw last week in a'udhu billahi. Now we've got bismillahi. As we mentioned last week, the lam on this letter, because there's a kasra on the meme, doesn't become full, and we don't say Bismillahi, Bismillahi. That would make the lam full. We keep it empty and we say Bismillahi, Bismillahi, Bismillahi. Okay. After the lam with the shadda on, we've got the letter ha. We know it comes from the bottom of the throat now, so we can really pinpoint that area when we say he. Bismillahi, Bismillahi. And I would probably recommend that you just practice this first part of the basmalah, just saying Bismillahi, just so that you can really focus on where this ha is coming from. This is probably the phrase which you'll say the most often, so it's really good to have practice in this phrase just to make sure you are getting the points of origin in the right place. So, Bismillahi, Bismillahi. Okay. Moving from the ha, we go to the ra. We've not covered the rules of ra yet, but this ra is a full, an example of a full ra because of the fatha on. So we say ar-ra, ar-ra, and that ra is connected to a ha. Where does this ha come from? It comes from the middle of the throat. Is it any stronger than the ha that we've seen in Allahi? No, it isn't. Is it any weaker? No, they've both got the exact same characteristics, so they both should be as strong as each other. Allah, Allah. We're really holding on to that ha. As we said, a mistake could be that you push the letter ha higher than what it should be, and it goes to the top of the throat instead, and you have a kh sound, and you hear ar-Rahman, ar-Rahman. Whereas it shouldn't be that. There should be no K, no KH sound, completely a ha sound, and it should be ar-Rah, ar-Rah, ar-Rah. Okay. So, Bismillahi, ar-Rah, and then we've got a meme. So we've got here a meme with a fatha on, and we've got what after it? What is this standing on the line after the meme? Can anyone write in the box what that is? Yeah, so we've got people saying it's a standing, but what is it a standing? It's a standing alif. Okay. So 3 different answers there. It may be worth just going onto the whiteboard and just explaining that a bit more. Okay. So again, I'll ask the question. Let's just clear this. I'll ask the question, what letter needs to go with an alif to make it into a lengthening sound? So that's my question for you. Let me say it again because I may not have said it right. What vowel needs to go with an alif to make it into a lengthening sound? What vowel needs to go with an alif to make it into a lengthening sound? Perfect. So we've all said it's a fatha. Where does that lengthening sound come from? If you've got a fatha and an alif, where does it come from? Perfect. Testing people's writing skills more than anything and their speed at writing. So yeah, correctly said, Al-Jawf, the empty space, that's where your fatha and alif come from. Okay, so you've got a fatha and you've got an alif. So if we see a word with that in, we'll have the word kitab. And we know the word kitab means book. It's a very simple word. So we've got here a kaf with a kasra on to one length, we've got a da with a fatha on, but then after the fatha we've got an alif. So here we've got a construction of a harf mad because we've got an alif and a fatha together. Okay, so how many lengths do we lengthen that to? To two, exactly. So we've gone from a single fatha to a fatha and an alif. So it goes from kitabun to kitabun, kitabun. Okay, very simple. In the way that you write this construction together, there are differences, and you will come across these differences in your recitation of the Quran. So there's another way of writing this. So it's very, very similar, but instead of the alif being written in the text, what you'll actually see is a standing alif next to the letter. Okay. So again, you've still got your kaf with your kasra on. You've still got your ta with your fatha on. But before, when you did have the alif as part of the writing, here instead of it being as part of the script, the alif is actually written standing by itself. What you may have come across as a khala zabar, a standing alif, or an alif by itself, standing on top of the satr and standing on top of the line of the word, and then your last letter as it was. Is there any difference between these two? Absolutely not. You've got your fatha, you've got your alif. This one is part of the text. This one, it is standing. They're both examples of a harf mad, both elongated to two lengths. Absolutely no difference between the two. So the point that we want to make here is that you have a harf mad when you have a fatha and an alif, but just be aware that the alif may not be written always in the same way. Another example of this is the word salah. If we just go to the other side and write the word excuse me. So you have again the word salatan. And again you have a fatha on the lam. And this time you have a waw, which comes from the origin of the verb of salah, which is salla yusalli salatan, and salawat, which is where the waw comes in. But this time you actually have the standing alif written on top of a waw. So before we had a hamza written on the pedestal of an alif, this time we have an alif, a standing alif, written on the pedestal of a waw. And again, it all comes back to the origin of what these letters, what these verbs are. But from our point of view, all we want to know is that there is a formation of a harf mad, a lengthening sound here. You've got a fatha and a standing alif. Despite the fact that it comes on this pedestal of a waw, you still have that connection together. Despite the fact that it's not written as a fatha and alif in the text, you've still got that elongated sound, that harf mad example, and that should be lengthened to two lengths long. Okay, so I hope everyone understood that, and we'll go back to our dars for today. Okay, so we got back to Ar-Rahman. We said the meme has a fatha on. After that, we've got an example of a standing alif. So it goes from one length of the meme being a ma. We've got a standing alif after it now. So we go to ma. It goes to two lengths. So you've gone from a single to the double length because you've got this construction of a harf mad. So we've got Ar-Rahma, Ar-Rahma, Ar-Rahma. After that, we've got the noon with a kasra on. Again, it needs to be a complete kasra. Not saying Ar-Rahmana with an E sound, but it's Ar-Rahmani, Ar-Rahmani, really getting the lips down. The noon completely connects to the ra, just as we had the ha of the word of Allah connecting to the ra. Now we've got the noon connecting to the ra. Again, it's got a fatha on, so this makes the ra full. So we say ar-ra, ar-ra. Ha again, we don't want to have any kh sound in it. but this time it's actually got a kasra on it. So we want to bring the bottom lips down. Not only does it have a kasra on it, what do we have an example here of now? Similar to with Ar-Rahmani, we had an example of a harf mad with a fatha and an alif. Now we've got another example of a harf mad. We've got a kasra with a ya. So you can see these harf mad sounds, it sounded maybe a little bit obscure, but you can see even in one sentence, we've got multiple examples of a harf mad, of a lengthening sound. So again, the reasoning for that, we know that it goes from one length of the ha to a double length. It goes from he to he, he, he. Okay, and then the last meme, very simple, the two lips coming together, a kasra on it. So you want a complete kasra with the bottom lips coming down. If you were stopping on that meme and completing that phrase, then you could just put a sukoon on, a non-original sukoon, and that would close off that meme. So you would disregard the vowel on the end of that word. Okay, so we've gone through kind of some things to look out for with this phrase. Probably a little bit simpler than the first phrase that we went through, or to be honest, it may be that we're becoming more apparent and more used to the concept of a kasra kamila. We know that every time we have a kasra, you need to bring the bottom lips down. We're becoming a little bit more aware of origins of the letters. So we know that we've got two has here and we've got a ha. All of them have the same characteristics. All of them have the same strength. So we need to be going to the right point of origin and giving them the characteristics that are due. We know about huruf al-mad, we know about lengthening sounds. So the meme on the word ar-Rahmani, we're not going to speed through it and give it less than 2. We're not going to elongate it to more than 2 because there's no need. So we read that to 2 lengths. And the last one, similarly, if we were not ending the end of this ayah and we had the construction of the kasra and the ya on the word ar-Rahimi, we know that that goes to 2 lengths as well. So we're kind of pulling through all different things from all different lessons to be able to put them into practice in actually what we're reciting, and that's the whole point of what we're doing here. So we'll just go through the phrase all together and just recite this. And again, just as we advised last week, try and practice. I'll give a little bit of space, and we'll be stopping at the end of this verse so we can disregard the vowel at the end. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So alhamdulillah, we finished the basmala for today after going through at-ta'awudh. Today covered quite a lot of material, a lot of information, but more so information to practice on. So what I'd recommend is that you just go through this PowerPoint again, or with the slides or with the workbook that you've got. Everything's on the CMN website, so you can refer to things, or if needed, we can send you the pictures to practice on. Just as we've done today, start at the bottom. If there isn't a letter which you're struggling with, go to another letter from the same point of origin, practice that one, and then link the two together so that you know that you're exactly at the same place. We've covered all the letters, the 28. We've categorized them into 5 main points of origin and said that there's actually 17 specific points of origin from a academic point of view. And inshallah, what that will do when we're now building up and categorizing letters in different ways, it'll allow us not only to know where the letter comes from, but what joins in with the origin of that letter to enhance it a little bit more. And that is what the characteristics of the letters are. So just touching onto it a little bit, we had the letter ha. We know it comes from the middle of the throat, but what characteristics are going to be put with that ha coming from the middle of the throat to allow it to be as strong as we can. And we'll see multiple examples of different letters and things that we can do, characteristics that we can add in to now make these letters as perfect as we can. Okay. So inshallah, any questions you can ask now. If not, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us with what we've learned today and to keep us connected with the Quran, to keep us of the people of the Quran who are the closest to him. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم إنا نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك والغنيمة من كل بر والسلامة من كل إثم والفوز بالجنة والنجاة من النار. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Jazakumullahu khairan for joining us, and inshallah we'll see you next week at the same time for the next lesson. And Jazakumullahu khairan for your du'as.